Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 637, Coffins and Treehouses. For Monday, May 23rd, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Well, it's time for the annual hand-wringing over what the Upfronts are becoming. The event still accounts for most of the year's broadcast ad deals, but now digital sales have been folded in and seem to be steering the ship. What does it all mean? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, why it's time to end digital display ads, how the iOS fiasco is driving advertisers to Android, the weird world of the Costco influencer, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the principal analyst at Insider Intelligence. Mr. Jeremy Goldman is here. Hi, Jeremy.
Great to be with you.
Great to have you on the program. Now, next, he's written 5 books. He's a multiple startup success, and now is the host of Corona TV. Mr. Joseph Jaffe is here. Hi, Joe.
Hi, and I figured out the solution to people swearing on the show. Do you want to know what it is?
What is the solution?
It's called self-policing. So if I say and then it's just great. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
You have to give me that sound effect. I know it's part of your setup there, but I want that sound effect.
It's let me tell you, it is awesome.
And finally, he's the Chief Brand and Marketing Officer for GRK Fresh Creek and board member at Mashburn Enterprises, Mr. Jonathan Sackett. Hi, Jonathan.
Bobby! I know we all want to start by wishing me a happy birthday, and it really was my birthday this week, guys. So
I know. I didn't believe it, but it was true.
It's lie. I just wanted attention, so I post happy birthday to myself. It's called self-policing. Oh, boy.
Okay, I'm just going to stop all the sound effects. Okay. I'm having too much fun.
That's the way to accentuate the show, Joseph.
I know, and I figured out how to play the hop, but anyway.
Well, let's just jump into the topics then so we can avoid the music and sound effects. As the upfronts get into full swing, there comes a realization that the new fronts that used to be happening before the upfront have now been almost entirely absorbed by their elder sibling. Through consolidation and the quick rise of new platforms, streaming and digital advertising opportunities have become core to the broadcast model. Now, none of this is a big surprise, but Jonathan, last year we were talking about the ad industry moving more toward a flexible model that wasn't dependent on upfront commitments. Does the bundling on digital and broadcast change that? Is the model shifting so radically now?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's the right saying. When COVID came along, it's changed a lot of things about this, and it's probably for the better, to be honest with you. I would assume that everybody knows what the difference between new fronts and upfronts are, and basically what you're talking about with the upfronts is it's a party. So you show up, you schmooze, you find shows or programming that you want to sponsor that will hit your target and blah, blah, blah. Well, I think, in my humble opinion, I think that this is a good move, and I think it's going to allow for more fluidity and flexibility across platforms. Because, I don't know what you guys think about this, and Joseph, I'm very interested in what you have to say about this too, because I am surprised that it's taken this long, or that it took a pandemic to make the model a little bit more flexible. Because what happens is this old pay and pray model isn't healthy, and it isn't working. And what happens is you can be halfway through a buy and see it's not working and still have to finish it. So I think that what's happening right now is because of that flexibility and because of the emergence of streaming and the popularity of streaming and people being home, I think it's an absolute necessity that the model has to become a little bit more flexible, so that whether you can jump with intra-platform jumping, so in other words, Discovery Plus or whatever, any of these platforms, if you can see something isn't working or how to turn it, you don't just have to put your creative out there and pray that it's going to work. I think what's going to happen is the fluidity of the platforms is going to work to the consumer and the corporation's benefit.
I'm not. First of all, I think that's a really great way to put it. I mean, it frames up the argument really well for why this change is happening now. I'm not entirely sure that that's what the broadcast networks or the networks as a whole are looking for, though. I mean, they're not looking for this flexibility. They're looking for the same upfront commitment that they always got. And it seemed like we were going toward a more flexible reality where you wouldn't have to be committed to all these ad dollars on a show that you didn't know whether or not it was going to be a success or not. I mean, it's just like, and plus corporations, the advertisers, they were looking for more flexible buys so that they could respond more quickly to market realities like you were positioning. But what I'm looking at here is that the networks, by gobbling up and consolidating all this digital into the broadcast offering, they're back to trying to get upfront commitments, right? I mean, that's what it looks like. It looks like they're trying to stave off the flexibility that was coming into play as a result of the pandemic. Am I wrong about that?
No, I think you're right. But I do think that it allows for the concept to become more real. I think what happens is, if something is working, if something isn't working, there are so many entertainment options out there now that the big networks have muscle memory. That's what I would compare it to. I think what they're doing is they're saying, well, hey, no, we need the money now, versus saying what's going to be best for the consumer or the advertiser. Now, that also can't not allow for creativity. The biggest problem that these companies have is back in the day, our work with UPS, we would find ways to be more creative, not just brought to you by UPS, your shipping partner. You can do a lot more by these guys expanding and consolidating. At the same time, what it should allow for is a more flexible path. I know they don't want that. They want their upfront money, they want the money in the bank, and then they want it to, catch and release. But what's got to happen is those platforms, because of the expansion and simultaneous consolidation, what it does is it allows you to be more creative within those platforms. Now, will they allow for that? Well, they have the capacity to do so. I know they still want that money up front, the God-given dollar, but I'll tell you something. If they don't allow for that, they're missing the mark on creativity, they're missing the mark on expansion, and they're also missing the mark on conversion. Because if you've got to bend to the will of the people that are sponsoring these shows or these programs, and if you don't, you're going to die.
Now, you mentioned Joe and his opinion. I'm interested in your opinion as well. This is kind of a dream panel for talking about this particular subject matter, but I'd love to get Joe's opinion next. What are your thoughts on this?
Plus, Joe has the accent. Can't take that away.
Can't take that away either.
No.
I mean, this is a Long Island accent that just keeps them.
You're from Wisconsin, aren't you?
Exactly, Wisconsin, Long Island.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One is it actually makes me think of Google, and with Google buying and experimenting with so many different companies and offerings, many, in fact, most of which failed, and then of course a couple of ridiculous successes, Android and YouTube in particular. But what people didn't realize is what they really were doing is, in a way, it was a bit of misdirection and also running interference, but they were protecting the cash cow, which was search.
Right.
And it's still, and so in many respects, there's a lot of running interference to protect the cash cow for as long as it will still deliver some value. And I think we all recognize, the train has left the station, the ship has left the dock, or the cat is in the hen house with the fox and the pigeons. But the bottom line is that the age of streaming has arrived. And I find it fascinating. I mean, as someone who's like plunged his entire life and committed 110% to streaming, but I've just watched with interest Conan ending his run to do a weekly show on HBO Max, a la John Oliver. Ellen coming to the end of her run. Even seeing John Oliver and Trevor Noah kind of coming under the microscope, questioning, wait a second, are these guys comedians? Are they talk show hosts? Are they philosophers? Are they commentators? Etc. And I think right now, we've seen this, which is things take a long time to change, and then they happen overnight, and that change happens overnight. Right now, if you are any of the networks, you can say whatever you want. You can protest whatever you want, but it's all just PR hacking, hacks and spin. The bottom line is this is the new world, right? This is the new era. And people are not going to tune in and set their DVRs or watch live, on Thursday night must-see TV. That time is over. And so right now, these guys need, and I'm actually not even criticizing them. I'm just thinking these guys need as many horses in the race as possible. And I think they all realize that streaming is the future. They just don't want to have to admit it yet. And so this idea of getting their dollars up front, what Bob was saying, they got to do it. They have no other play, and they have to do it for as long as they can. But I think they realize that right now, when digital was thrown in as value add, right now that flip is occurring. They just don't want to admit it, but they know it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree. I also think, though, that it's also providing the illusion of control. So
Right.
it's the illusion of control, not just for us, the consumer. It's also the illusion of control for the sponsors. So, coming at you with these. I don't know if you guys have ever been to any of those soirees, those functions, and what they do is you get these packets. And all these wonderful things that you can do within our platform or within our network or our portfolio, however they position themselves. If you don't provide that flexibility and that basic illusion of control, these companies are going to go. They're going to go to sponsor the things that are giving them what they think they want. And now it's going to be business as usual until you can't anymore. So.
Well, I think that's true, but I also think there's honestly, most of my points are taken up by you guys, so I'm not going to reiterate any of the above. I would just point out also that, and this is something that we've done a little bit of research into. A lot of streaming is being taken up by subscription services where advertising isn't available. And yes, HBO Max is going to have an advertising tier, and obviously Hulu's ad supported and so on. But I think that it's something to be thinking about, can you dictate the terms still? Can you basically say that we're going to be giving you major eyeballs and that's something that I think is going away. But, you do kind of want to ride that for as long as you can.
Yeah, and that kind of goes. I agree with you. I think it also kind of goes back to one of my points that I want to make sure that I'm getting through here is that if you're not allowing your company, your brand, your positioning to be more creative, and that's really what a lot of this comes down to, because you bring up subscriptions. Well, we're making our money off subscriptions versus advertising dollars. Well, there's still creative ways to say powered by, Intel Inside or something. There's versus here's a banner, here's a tile, here's a 30-second spot. There are more creative ways to get your brand into the content. And I think that what we got to do with these streaming services and such is find more creative ways to put that Coca-Cola in Brad Pitt's hand or something. There's more creative ways to do it with content versus sponsorship.
And I'll add something as well, which is I saw one of the source articles is that they're doing what comes naturally to them, which is to be greedy pigs.
That's right.
But God bless them, because they're playing,
God
they're
bless those greedy pigs.
Yeah,
I think we found the name for the show.
Oh my goodness, the three little greedy.
You're
pigs.
welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Just send me my Jaffe coin dollar. No. So what they're doing is they're trying to have their cake and eat it, and in some cases they may very well succeed because there are different levels of subscription. There's ad-supported. I mean, Hulu was probably the first to do it well because they started that way. It's where they came from. But
right.
There's the ad-supported lower version, and then there's the ad-free high version. But one of the ways that they're playing around with it are these, I guess, equivalent of like anchor tenants, right? Which is if you want to see, a movie streaming on the day that it actually goes into cinema, then you're going to need to get, you're going to need to pay the higher level, that higher subscription level. In many respects, it's almost like a technology product, right? It's like a piece of software. The free level, and then there's the kind of the low, medium, and high, the silver, gold, platinum level. And so what they're realizing is that in this a la carte environment, especially the larger networks, the ones that have entry and have a touch points in Hollywood, in film and other different industries, they've got an ability to kind of create some kind of new bundled solution. And in some cases, people are going to take the ad-supported one, and in other cases, they're going to take the premium subscription one. But for them, it's added value.
That goes back to the old problem that we constantly come up against when we talk about streaming and subscriptions and the advent of an ad-supported tier. It ends up segmenting the audience so that the rich, desirable audience is paying to see no ads, and then the less desirable audience that wants free content or wants to pay less is going to be bombarded with ads. And it doesn't.
What you're talking about is fragmentation, right? And right. I do believe that, like I said, if it turns into, if you can't sponsor this, it's got to be a content play. And that flexibility with this expansion is exactly where we want to be. And Joe, I think you said it when you dead on when you said, look, this is the way things are going. Whether you like it or not, or the pandemic kickstarted this, it's already out there. And if you don't jump on it and find more creative ways to position yourself, you're missing the boat.
And I will also say, I think the whole subscription versus, like people who the haves and have-nots, and woe was me, I have to, sit through a few ads. I think that there are a few things there. One thing is the have-nots, there are a lot more of them. So even if it's going to be a little bit hard to, reach households that make over $250,000, there's still a lot of other people in that other category. And I think the other thing is there's still can be a lot of innovation with respect to ads that can make ads better, particularly with streamers. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Like Hulu, I remember these interstitials, like choose your ad experience. You have to watch an ad, but pick the one that's more relevant to you. And if you think about it, that's a minor innovation, but that's actually helpful, right? So there are things out there that can be done to deliver ads, but to do it in a meaningful way that adds a little bit more value to people's lives.
Well, yeah, and more than half of what we do as advertisers or brand stewards or whatever your role is, a lot of it comes down to entertainment, and whether it's sponsored content, infiltrated content, or just outright entertainment, like Hump Day for Geico, for example, or something. You're basically, people ask me all the time, long form, short form, is this too much? Is this not enough? Well, I think there's good and bad. It really, if you've got good content and entertaining and informative content, it's good. And if it's too long, if you're worried about things being too long in long form, too short in short form, you're missing the boat again. Because what it comes down to is getting those eyeballs and getting that interactivity and getting that entertainment value for what you're trying to position.
And I think also, I mean, we have to remember that this, the cutting the cord phenomenon was happening way before COVID. So this was happening, and we were starting to also see a lot of these networks getting quite greedy. And a lot of consumers that had cut the cord suddenly were looking at their monthly bills for all these subscription services going, wait a second, I'm paying 3 times what I was paying before. So we have to witness this. Recognize that this is the new Wild West, and there are going to be winners, and then there are going to be losers. I mean, I remember even when my kids came to me and they said, "We want the Disney Plus bundle because we want to watch The Mandalorian." And it was during COVID, and it was like, sure, because people, like, there was nothing else to do. And the bundle was Hulu, and the bundle was ESPN, and that worked for me because I love English football and European football, and so suddenly what was really happening is one piece of content was suddenly becoming the bait that brought you in and allowed you to kind of buy into something. But
the bait to switch.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. That might be the new name. But there's another thing as well. I mean, I think, Bob, really, really important point that you raise about the haves and the have-nots. But the other thing to think of is if you're Gucci or Louis Vuitton or whatever, the reality is that you need to advertise and connect and target the haves. And if those haves are living in a world now with iOS do not tracks and the haves are living in a world of premium subscription and no ads, how the hell are you going to connect with the haves? So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword too. And as I said, this is the new Wild West, and just buckle up because, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
One of the things that I think is kind of a leading edge of this is the consolidation that I mentioned, the consolidation that's going on in the industry. I know HBO Max was already heading toward an ad-supported tier. But with the announcement that they are probably going to be acquired by, shed off by AT&T and acquired by Discovery Networks, Discovery Networks specializes in doing a subscription, but also doing advertising. And, having these two major players come together, and I just see this as being the trend, that we're going to continue to see this consolidation, and that ads are going to win out, and that we're going to end up with the same model that we had with broadcast only with streaming. And it's going to be consolidated down to 3, 4, 5 networks or whatever. It seems like that's the direction we're taking. Jeremy, would you back me up on that, or would you say that I've got the facts wrong at this point?
I wish that I could, but I think that the ultimate reason for the way that things were done, the way that they were done previously, is that a lot of it has to do with how a particular industry pops up, right? And generally speaking, if you look to see the fact that Netflix, right, was not really advertising supported. Prime, which we're not talking about, but that's huge, and that's not ad supported. So when you think about it, it just evolved in a different way. So while I think that we are going to see ads, there are people now who are not rich, who pay full price, who are probably going to stay with the non-ad supported experience, just because that's become something that people realize, that of course I'm going to pay $15 a month for this one and that one and that one. So and if they need a little bit of money in order to start, paying for more and more streamers, even if there is consolidation, they'll just cancel cable, and pound for pound, that's still going to be cheaper for them. So I think that a lot of people will pay for these subscriptions, and there will still be a decent amount of ad-supported product out there. But ultimately, from an inventory perspective, you're going to really see inventory come down in a lot of ways, or at least there'll be a lot of it, but a lot of it won't be desirable.
Well, I think we're probably beating this dead horse here, but the only other thing that I would bring up, Bob, is that I think what happens, it's a good point, Jeremy. Once you've built the railroad and you've laid those tracks, it's hard to turn that train around, and it's hard to think differently about the tracks that you've already laid. But it's also we have to ask ourselves specifically, what is an ad, right? Because it's those the days of Cheers having 60 million viewers. Those days are gone. You're lucky if you can get 10 these days, just because of the fragmentation. But you have to start to think about more creative ways to demonstrate your product's abilities or your product's brand or whatever you're trying to do. If you don't remain flexible with your brand, those train tracks are they're gonna suck you in and say, no, this is a 30-second spot, versus sponsored content or other more creative ways to illustrate what you're trying to convey.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I do want to move on. I'm going to talk next about display advertising and how there's an article out this past week kind of making a case for why display advertising should go away as well. Some interesting points, but I'm a bit skeptical. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by Wix. Now, if you've not heard about Wix, you're living under a rock, because Wix is the leading cloud-based web design and development platform trusted by over 200 million people worldwide. Now, when your agency partners with Wix, you unlock an entire digital ecosystem for creating, managing, and growing your business online, so you can run your agency the way you've always wanted to. Get the full coding and design freedom to create anything your clients need, along with the tools to manage and collaborate with your team seamlessly from anywhere. And when it comes to growing your business, you can get matched with new leads every day and earn revenue share for every website you create. They'll all be backed by Wix's industry-leading security and site performance. You'll also have dedicated account managers on standby 24/7, so you can reach your goals and start setting new ones as soon as possible. But don't take my word for it. See for yourself. Head over to wix.com/partners and reimagine what your agency can accomplish. That's wix.com/partners. And we thank them very much for their support of our program. Well, like I mentioned, there was a somewhat interesting article in Media Post this past week that made a strong case that digital display advertising needs to end. Joe, what are your thoughts on the article, and is it a reasonable idea or is it missing the point? I'll kind of reserve my judgment. I kind of said I was skeptical, but I'll leave it at that. What are your thoughts?
I think we got Bob's opinion already here.
I think so. I should shut up now.
I mean, it's an interesting question, because it just, instead of beating around the bush, it just like asks the question. It's like, why do we even have this stuff? It doesn't even work, or what's the point? And there are 4 reasons given, which is performance, user experience, audience targeting, and the economics are broken. And they're kind of like meh, like type of examples given. I think the media question is the bigger one, right? Which is it time for the industry to ditch display ads? But the context of this is a website. And I was thinking to myself, how much time of our digital day are we spending on websites and versus everything else, right? Versus in Clubhouse, versus for the most part, on mobile and specifically platforms. And when we think about Instagram and Facebook and et cetera, is that a display ad? It's not a display ad. And unfortunately, the websites that are still using display, and for the most part, they're publishers, are just creating these just awful experiences. They're shooting themselves, in multiple feet. With multiple pop-ups and ridiculous ad units. It goes back to what Jonathan was saying, which is, if creativity holds the key, and creativity will always set you free, and creativity is always going to be the North Star, we're not seeing much creativity in display. This, I always cite this example. The very first banner ad that Absolute Vodka did, which I worked on when I was at Chiat, was a 468 by 60 horizontal banner, and it was called Absolute Limitation. And all you could see was the base of the bottle, the very base of the bottle, and even the word absolute limitation was cut off. But just enough was showing that you could actually make sense of it, that it was saying absolute limitation. And of course, the message there was, we're very limited. We, Absolute, of all brands that have created this iconic, incredible print campaign, we're limited with what we can do. But guess what? We figured out a way to do it in an authentic, on-brand way. And so we're just not seeing any of that. And so the bigger thing, I just wish there would have been a fifth, point here, which is creativity sucks. and
it's business as usual.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, really, I think the person who wrote this article, it's really interesting and provocative, but come on, we can do better than just talk about click-through rate and
exactly,
and targeting and privacy. And I mean, it's really right at the end when he talks about the economics are broken, because here we are, the very first topic, discussing subscription and ad-supported and figuring out a way that says, you know what, you can again beat that dead horse until eventually there's nothing but a rotting carcass, or you can figure out a different solution. And sometimes that does mean, slaughtering the cash cow.
Well, you can beat a dead horse with a dead horse too. So
and a cash cow and a cash cow,
and there's a whole farm of opportunity. Hey, just curiosity, Joe, what year were you at Chiat?
I was there 1999 through 2002. So I was there during 9/11, and I was there during that time.
Wow. Okay. Because I got my start being the digital division for Chiat, which we were called Spectracom at the time. Small world.
Nice. Well, I worked on Kmart and Absolute, two very different brands. That's for damn sure.
It's night and day right there.
Although I mean, I'll go back to it as well, which is we worked on the return of the blue light special, and what we actually did was I'll never forget it. We turned, Disney was one of them, CBS Market Watch was one of them. We turned prominent homepages, really prominent homepages, blue. And what we actually did was we actually blended. We're obviously working with the sites. The entire background was the same color as the blue light, right from the blue light special. And the banners themselves were also the same color. And so the banners disappeared into the background and almost took over the whole page. But again, it just, I was always heartened and motivated by the fact that going back to that same point, creativity holds the key in an advertising world. It's not, I'm sorry to say, media spots and dots and spreadsheets and
checking, you're absolutely right. I just want to interject there. Checking the box is not going to move the needle. It's not. If you can't find ways, there's limitations in the technology. There's limitations in tracking a true click through or a session. There are challenges with that. But if you don't try to find ways to bend those norms and folkways of display ads, again, you're missing the mark.
But the bigger,
I just want to say one more thing on this topic, which is the kind of the Hail Mary or the last hurrah, whatever you want to call it, is now programmatic and automation, etc. So we are really just trying to squeeze every last dime and every last piece of value from what I think everyone recognizes, especially in light of what's happening from a privacy standpoint, a dying value proposition. But does it mean advertising is dead? Does it mean digital advertising is dead? No, it doesn't.
No.
This is, to me, I think, when we're thinking about this, the biggest sin of digital, when it arrived, is that it was very trackable. And by that, I mean, display looks really, bad in a lot of ways based off of how we track it. Do you necessarily, if you have a billboard up, do you know how many cars that have passed by that billboard? And obviously, yes, there are ways that people track out-of-home advertising. But I think that, this has been a little bit of a problem, that display just looks bad in comparison to a few other things you can spend your money on. But I think that we can't take away from the fact that there are plenty of other ways that you can spend your money as a brand, and display will go away, or it'll be pushed to improve based off of what the other options are. Something doesn't go away just because you say it's imperfect. It has to be replaced by things that are better. And over time, there, will be better things to spend your money on, unless display finds ways to innovate and to do things that other technologies can't offer.
Listening to this conversation, I'm getting more and more conflicted about things, because I went into this very skeptical, but Joe, you made a really good point that who's on websites right now, who's spending time on there. I think that's the bigger issue, is the time now to shift to other types of advertising online because display ads are not going to be a thing for very much longer. I think that's a really salient point. But the thing that I keep coming back to is this reminds me so much of direct mail. It always does. Everybody, craps on direct mail and says that it's, 0.5% response rate. But with direct mail, you know exactly how much you spend and how much you make, and you know whether or not it's successful, and you know whether or not it's got value and whether or not it's generating money. And I think the same is true of a lot of banner advertising. I mean, we make fun of that 0.05% response rate, but someone with a balance sheet or a spreadsheet is going through it and saying, we just made money,
Right.
I mean,
if it wasn't working, it wouldn't exist.
Right,
and
exactly.
It's the same with robot calls. Somebody is converting.
And it seems that so I take your point about people leaving websites and going to platforms and using mobile devices and how the desktop display ad is a thing of the past. I think that's a really important point that we need to recognize as an industry and start to begin the evolution away from banner ads as they were. But I don't think that the banner ad will die entirely. It can't die because I just go back to the fact that even though there's not a lot of direct mail going on, as much direct mail as there once was for certain industries, there's still people doing direct mail because it works. And I think the banner ad still offers that same value.
Well, you know what? That's a good point, Bob, because the thing that I would add to that is that if it's an ecosystem. If you're banking your marketing dollar on a banner ad converting, well, that's probably not a very smart thing to do. I think what you got to do is you have to look at the entire ecosystem of surrounding your consumer and the banners, the banner, the tile, whatever you're using, the degree of interactivity of the banner. Those are things that are part of an ecosystem. If they're the destination and you think, well, geez, I'm going to put all my marketing dollars into this banner campaign. Well, that's probably not the smartest thing to do. But if you're surrounding the consumer and reminding them why they should eat Pringles, and making your own Pringles sandwich, that's what's going to work for you. Not having it as a destination in isolation of your other initiatives.
Well,
and the other thing I wanted to say is that I'm not sure if I like the attitude of Mr. Jaffe on this. Can we remove him from this? I could just feel attitude coming from him.
No,
no,
I don't think so. Hey, continuing this conversation about ads moving from one platform to another. There's some indication that in the wake of iOS 14.5 coming out, offering consumers the choice not to be tracked, advertisers are starting to shift their spend to Android. Now, it's very preliminary data and it's not universal with all advertisers. But Jeremy, if it is happening and if it does continue to grow as a trend, is this a wise move to move from the iOS platform to Android platform and move your dollars from one to the other?
I mean, in short, yeah, because a lot of it has to do with, where are you getting the return that you're looking for? And obviously, this is, I think, one of those things that is it's a bit of a dicey, moment that we're in, where people don't really understand how this is going to play out over the long term. And if that's the case, then why would you not test? Why would you not try to do, this is very different than the TV upfronts, remember, right? Where you're not making a commitment to move your spend over entirely. You've got the ability to test and learn and look to see what's going to happen as a result. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, smart advertisers have to be, thinking about what's the best home for their dollars.
Is it mainly in a testing phase then, do you think? I mean, I wasn't sure whether or not the dollars were going over because they had tested and they knew that it was going to work better, and so they're shifting lots of their spend from one platform to the other, or they're still just largely testing it to see whether or not it holds up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in some ways it's a bit of a theoretical based off of when we're having this conversation, right? Because people don't really have that great data yet, and it's obviously a little bit shifting in terms of what this is going to really mean for iOS in the long term. So I think that it's something that people think that their spend might be better served, being a little bit more weighted towards Android. And that's just a little bit of a hypothesis, as people have kind of figured, well, my, ad spend might not give me the same return, which is like a reasonable hypothesis when you think about it, right? If all of a sudden a decent number of people who would be ideal for you are not being tracked, then maybe your advertising is going to be less efficient. So in some ways, this is people, the cart before the horse, so to speak.
And it's at best, it's a short-term solution, to a long-term, gaping wound when it comes to where the industry is heading and where trends are heading, because it's no different to thinking of the haves and the have-nots. In this case, it's haves or someone that has, iOS versus has Android. Different segments with different demographics, different lifestyle, different attitudes, different opinions, and even when you're looking at a certain, something like the creator economy, you're going to see a very different breakdown on iOS versus Android. And so it doesn't solve a longer term solution, which is how do you target, how do you connect with certain SKUs of audience that may or may not disproportionately have a larger representation on iOS versus Android, or of course, the other way around. And I mean, for me, I've obviously been spending, many of you know, a fair amount of time on Clubhouse, and of late, Android has now been opened up to, or at least Clubhouse has been opened up to Android, and the bump that everyone may have expected hasn't necessarily occurred. And one of the things is that kind of it's just a different audience. It's a different audience. People expected, the audience, levels to double and triple and quadruple, etc. But it's just not happening. One, because people might feel that they missed the boat and they're too late to get in on this new phenomenon. But also just very different makeups of consumers. And so, like, sure, short term, move over to wherever it's easier and wherever you can be lazier and wherever you can kind of, infiltrate and interrupt and disrupt a consumer's life with uninspiring, advertising. But at the same time, it's definitely not scalable and sustainable.
I'm glad you brought this up about the audience, because the conventional wisdom is that the Android audience is not as wealthy, is not as high a demographic and not as appealing to advertisers as the iOS audience is. And there's kind of like this feeling, this sense that Android is a consolation prize in this situation. Jonathan, would you say, I mean, given what Joe just said and, given that context, do you think Android is still a consolation prize, or is it actually a growing platform, a vibrant platform that can deliver the kind of results that advertisers are seeking to get?
I think it's the latter. I think, you can't look, there's a lot, there's subsegments of these segments. And I think what happens a lot of times is that you also get the rebellion, the people that just want to stay away from iOS, right? It's, there's too many people on that, so I'm going to prove my independence or something. I think it's growing. I think it's viable. And I think there's just a ton of opportunity there. I don't think it's the consolation prize by a long shot, but I do agree that I still think as marketers, the marketing community still looks down its nose at the platform. But I do think it's viable, and I think that there's those subsegments within there of people who, might have a chip on their shoulder and something to prove against iOS.
Well, I got one last topic I want to get to, squeeze it in because we're running out of time. It's my favorite topic of the day. There's a weird new influencer out there called the Costco influencer. And what Costco influencers are currently doing is they are taking pictures of the amazing deals that they're finding at Costco.
Can you believe it?
They're just holding up their package of chicken in front of the Costco sign, taking a photograph of it. It is the weirdest influencer phenomenon that I've seen for any brand, yet it's working. It's doing gangbusters for their business by leveraging these influencers who are out there just tweeting about and posting about Costco scores. So anybody want to take this? I mean, Joe, are you a Costco shopper?
I mean, sure.
Why not? Hey, why not? Let's go there together. What the heck?
I use Costco all the time in all of my presentations, including this joke that my daughter once told me, which is, where will you be safe during a zombie apocalypse? And the answer is Costco, because they have plenty of food, plenty of water, and you need a membership card to get in. So that's well, at least somebody enjoyed that. But
I knew that was going to come up again.
This is weird. This whole thing is a bit weird, and I think that they missed an opportunity. And I will not use that C word again, creative, because they could have done so much in terms of being able to call out the sometimes the esoteric and the eccentric and the ridiculous items that you see at Costco that makes it so awesome. Like, for example, going into Costco and seeing Coffins, as once I did when I went into and Treehouses. And so I think they could have done a lot better than just kind of uninspiring, hey, look at this great deal that I got at Costco. Everybody knows that that's what you're going to get at Costco. But in terms of elevating them beyond just we're here, we're just reminding you we're here. I mean, I just feel it was a missed opportunity, and they could have done so much more. And as I said, elevated Costco from just what we know to maybe what we might not know or what might surprise us.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I mean, look, if you can, anytime, look, this is 101. Anytime you can ignite the people who are fans of yours to speak on your behalf, you're going to lose some of that control over your brand regardless. But what do you do after that? There's got to be a bigger picture. I think anybody holding up a banner and saying, hey, this is great, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to post this on my social media and stuff, that's rarely a bad thing. However, it can backfire on you, as we all know, and we've all gotten burned by this at one point or another. I just think that there's a bigger picture to it, a bigger picture of brand versus, hey, look at the deal. The being the low cost leader will only take you so far. Back in the day, Bob, you remember when we took over Walmart after the bouncing smiley face, there was a reason why we wanted people to live better, right? Not just be the low price leader, because the low price leader has an end. And marketing and advertising is about finding the infinite, not finding the finite.
Yeah, and the pandemic has seriously infringed on my Costco buffet. That's always a great thing to do.
You didn't buy a coffin or a treehouse?
No, I went from tasting station to tasting station and had my...
Well, I was the same way. A lot of people are gluten-free. I'm all about free gluten. Whenever you go to Costco and those little things at the end. And you know what, though? That actually makes me think that maybe these influencers are a thing because some people are concerned about going into a store needlessly. So if that goes away, then does this subtype of a subtype of a subtype of influencer go away as well?
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Mr. Jeremy Goldman. You can find him at insider-intelligence.com. That's the home of Insider Intelligence, where he is a principal analyst. So tell us, what's going on with you, Jeremy? What would you like to promote?
I think that I'll say that I have a report coming out this week. So all subscribers can get that. If you're an e-marketer insider intelligence person, you could go get that this week, and it's the most interesting e-commerce and retail CX, that's customer experience, of course, trends that people should be paying attention to. And basically, it tried to hone in on things that really transformed over the last year plus, and we're not really expecting to get back to normal. So that was really fun to try to dive into about 20 different trends and narrow it down to 6 or so.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. That's great. Yeah, everybody should definitely go out and check that out. Next up, we have Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at coronatv.show. I think I got that right. But tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
Well, not much going on in my life at the moment, except for the fact I'm relaunching my show on Thursday night, focusing on late nights. So I'm going to be live Monday through Thursday, 9:00 every night. But I also announced on my show that I am. It sounds still. I still can't believe the words that as they're forming in my brain. That I am due to undergo open heart surgery on June 22nd to repair a mitral valve. So apparently I sprung a leak, and I'm trying to be quite public about it and transparent about it, because this was found, in my annual, checkup, my annual physical, and if you're a 50-year-old male, or quite frankly, doesn't matter what age you are, and doesn't matter what gender you are, it's just so important to go and get your physical and find out these things that if they hadn't found it, I don't know what would have happened. And one of the things that I'm doing just to kind of bring I have a creator coin, a crypto creator coin called the Jaffe coin, and I've decided to kind of try and see whether I can create a use case, like a GoFundMe use case, but tied into the show. So if anyone wants to find out more and support 200, me with what I've done since March of 2020 with 260 interviews, including both of you, including Bob and Mr. Sackett, and Jeremy, you're going to have to come on the show now as well. But also, recognizing that I'm going to be out and off for a month, just go to rally.io. And you can go to actually, just type creator coin Jaffe, or go to rally.io/creator/Jaffe. And there are different levels and reward levels that you can actually sponsor my show or participate in the show, get a shout out, and also donate a little bit of coin. And, I hope it will be a nice use case. I'm also going to donate 10% of all proceeds to the Mitral Foundation. So this is my life right now, which is suddenly trying to be a talk show host and undergo open heart surgery at the same time. So, I think #FML. And for those of you that don't know what FML stands for, go and Google it and you'll see what it means.
Well, you're in good company. David Letterman went through the same thing. So there you go. You've got he made it. You can make it. I doubt that bum valve is going to be able to take you out. That's for sure.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Well, next up, we have Jonathan Sackett. We can find him at grkfresh.com. That's the home of GRK Fresh Greek, which is the place where he is the chief brand and marketing officer. So tell us what's going on in your world, Jonathan. What would you like to promote?
Well, as always, I always want to promote the show. Bob and I have been friends for years. I think he gets some of the best guests. My fellow panelists, I can't say enough about them. I think Joel would tell you that I am probably the most exciting guest he's ever had on his show, ever.
Why probably?
Yeah, I think Jamal probably got a little bit more attention than I did. But I always say promote the show. These guys are some of the smartest guys I've ever worked around. Jeremy and Joe, I can't say enough about these guys. So whatever they say is probably gold, and you should probably follow their lead. We're expanding. We've got a couple of 5-star restaurants now as part of the portfolio. Molivos is one of them in Manhattan. I'm rebranding. I've changed our name. I've changed our brand. That won't get unleashed probably until late summer. We're also striking up a deal to be in retail with Whole Foods. And I finally landed the right causes that I want to partner with. I can't say them yet because we're finalizing that agreement on a per transaction basis to make sure that we're live well by doing good. So we've got a lot of great things coming up. So I'm really excited. This is my focus right now is grkfresh.com. But you're going to see, everything is imported from Greece, never butter, never fried, only pure Greek olive oil. We've got a lot of good things happening, and we're going to do a lot of good, period. So.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love hearing what you're doing with that brand. You've really been doing a lot of work, and it's really showing. So thank you.
I gotta get out more often. That's what I gotta do.
But will it be available at Costco? That's what we want to know.
Because I want a treehouse, I want a coffin, and I want some fresh Greek food, right?
or you could say it won't be available at Costco because you don't want to end up in a coffin. So, it would be like...
Avoid the coffin, go to Greek food. The Mediterranean diet's the way to go, guys.
There you go.
Well, as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair, Joe. Apple's new tracking ad, despite all the controversy, despite all the people who are upset about the tracking that they're doing, this ad, I think, is brilliant at getting across the value of what they're doing for the consumer. Just the crowds following this guy around and, looking over his shoulder everywhere he is. I think it's a great illustration. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean the... Sometimes what you got to do is we always talk about the power of humanizing. And in some cases, advertising has always resulted to creating metaphors of something by not using humans. And in this case, it's the exact opposite, right? Which is using human beings to kind of bring the data to life, or at least understand, and make it real. So yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, right? It's fantastic because it hits home and it makes it less intangible, ephemeral, and quite frankly, what Apple does better than almost any other brand, which is emotional and the emotional connection.
I'm surprised you didn't use the C word. Creative.
I thought, sorry.
Yeah,
I thought,
Joe.
No, I was just going to say Costco.
Oh, no. That's going to be on my brain the rest of the night now.
Well, the fail of the week I'm going to give to MoMA. MoMA ran a hashtag campaign, Jeremy, for people to share their photos. And if you don't know, MoMA is a Museum of Modern Art. They had this opportunity to run a hashtag campaign where they wanted people to share their photos. But if you read the fine print, just using that hashtag gave to them the rights to use your photographs in perpetuity. It's like someone didn't even look at the disclosure that the lawyers put in front of them before they put it out to the public. It was just a disaster. When that got out, it got so many bad tweets and it kind of derailed the entire campaign. What are your thoughts?
Just that 2017 called and it wants its terms of service back. Honestly, this is one of those things where, if you think about the pros and cons of maybe I'm going to get some amazing art that's worth stealing, first off, probably not the case. And ultimately, when you think about all the bad PR that this generates, it comes to mind that, you've got to have incentives aligned. And unfortunately, you have a legal team that's probably incentivized in protecting an organization and writing a very conservative approach towards, how this hashtag contest should go. But the reality is that it's just better to understand the moment that you're in and trying to claim ownership over other people's creative without giving them their due. That's not in vogue, and it hasn't been for a while.
And now for my foul of the week, I'm going to give it to Twitch, Jonathan. And going to you, Jonathan, because you're my meme expert and you're the guy who knows this stuff. So Twitch demonetize. Apparently, there's this big thing on Twitch where hot tub people, I guess it's both men and women, but mainly women dressed in bikinis and underwear and other types of skinny clothing, sit in hot tubs and do shows from hot tubs. Now, Twitch demonetized all the hot tub streamers, not for violation of their user policy, but because it's unappealing to advertisers. Which is not, it's like painfully honest, but it's still a pain in the butt.
I think this is where we say the 70s called, and we don't want to see it. I couldn't believe that they were even open when they opened that can of worms. I was like, if this lasts longer than a millisecond, I'll eat my shirt, because I didn't see it lasting to begin with, and that's the reason why they stopped doing it. I don't know, man. It just seems a little. It seemed like a bad move from the get-go, and for them to retract the bad move, I'm surprised it took them as long as it did.
Yeah, it's really, really bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it online? Comment using the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again in 2 weeks, taking off for the Memorial Day holiday. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.